Hello from me, Mike Young, and welcome to the latest of our Broadcast Revolution events. Thanks to those of you who've dialed in right now for this online. It will also be available to watch again via our website, of course. All our previous events are there for you to enjoy. So if you want to know more about the BBC, independently produced podcasts, the Today programme, 5 Live, they're all there for you. Always worth dipping in and getting the pearls of wisdom from editors, presenters, producers there. For those watching the live stream, by the way, if you'd like to ask a question of our guest today, you can do so via our Twitter account. That's at Broadcast Revo. You can ask a question using the hashtag Join the Broadcast Revolution. I think the easiest way is frankly just to ask a question via this Zoom chat right here. I'll try and get through as many of those questions as I can. Midway through proceedings, by the way, today, we will pop a short poll on your screen. Please do take a moment to answer the handful of questions in that poll, as it helps us shape future events that hopefully you'll really want to watch. Now to our guest today. Will Guyatt is one of the most recognisable voices and faces in the world of technology broadcasting. His website says he speaks to over 10 million Brits a week. It's probably more now, isn't it? Probably more. On a weekly basis, certainly, and I can well believe it. Will has been LBC's technology correspondent for well over a decade. You've likely seen him pop up on the BBC News Channel, ITV News, Sky News, the list goes on and on. Plus, of course, there are podcasts that Will gets his teeth into, including the Sunday 7, about which we'll hear more very shortly. Will, first of all, how did you get started in being this voice of tech?
Somebody didn't turn up for an interview, and
that's the best way, isn't it?
The truthful story. So I trained as a journalist. I was working, and I had a great interest in technology at the time and wrote about technology. But I was running comms and PR for a publishing company. We had like a 6:50 p.m. interview with a local BBC radio station nearly 20 years ago now. That the person didn't turn up for one reason or another, but we didn't want to let them down. I knew about the subject and I ended up going on and talking about it and then got invited back the following week. So that's kind of where it started. And it's a bizarre thing in that I keep all sorts of data and spreadsheets. And this year I think I'm on for my biggest year yet. As of December the 1st, I've done 382, I think it was, interviews. And that's everything from my work at LBC, because I've been there for nearly 15 years now. It's a great place to work. But Sky News, I've just recently picked up some work with some Australian talkback radio stations, which is a completely different environment to be in because I'm talking to people on the other side of the world. But yeah, I'm really lucky. I get to talk about tech.
I was going to ask you about the evolution of tech, the issue of tech within mainstream news broadcasting, because it strikes me that maybe at the start of your LBC time, you might have been talking about the latest device, for example, the latest handset. Yet today, it strikes me that tech is woven into geopolitics, Elon Musk playing a central role at the very start of the latest Trump administration, for example. You're becoming, in essence, a technology commentator and a political commentator all woven into one.
And then when you get onto the subject of China in technology and the number of interesting conversations I've had recently where the moment you point out to a politician or a presenter that their smartphone's got more Chinese components than it's ever had before, yet they're still happy to use that smartphone, you find yourself in an interesting place. When I started 15 years or so back with the stations that I work with, I was often, hey, it's the tech nerd, it was the late night stuff. I did a lot of work with the great Ian Collins, king of late night radio, did a lot of work with him at the time. And it sort of was talking about there's a launch of this, or this has happened, or that has happened. But now, I'm on with Nick Ferrari talking about artificial intelligence, loss of jobs, the influence of China. Even right now, I'm doing a lot of work around the Australia social media ban for under 16s. That comes in a week today. And everybody wants to know more about it and how it's going to change, or could it come to the UK, for example. So, yeah, politics is all over everything that I now do.
I mean, I think that's fascinating because what Australia is trying to do there with that social media ban for a certain younger demographic, I mean, the eyes of the world are on that because it's going to be, has this worked or not? I mean, is that something that you think? I mean, online safety has been put onto the statute book into the UK much more significantly in the last year or so. Is that something you think is going to be a success in Australia? Can that work, and will it evolve over here?
I'm really interested in online safety, and it's about one of the only things that I won't charge for. If somebody says I'm unable to pay for these things, I will often go on and talk about how you keep people safe online, because I think it's a really important thing that's quite confusing for society. Australia is either going to be the greatest thing ever or the worst decision a country has ever made. I don't think there's anywhere between the two. In 5 years' time, we could be saying, look at the brave foresight of Australian society for taking a decision away from parents and families. Or we could be saying, what a stupidly blinkered idea that was not correctly thought out and was rushed. It's going to be one of the two. And I really don't know which it's going to be yet. But this is one of the reasons I've been taking work in Australia, because one of the greatest things about working on phone-in radio, talk radio, is you get to hear the views of people. And Australians are kind of broadly welcoming, but they don't have a clue how it's going to work. And the politicians I've spoken to in Australia have just said, well, it's the responsibility of the tech companies. They don't even know how it's going to work yet, and it's being launched in a week.
This is one of the great challenges for you as a broadcaster, as a communicator, is you are often talking about the latest technology, and that is going to flummox a great many of those people that you are broadcasting to. How important is it to essentially hold the hand of that audience and take them with you? Put aside the complexities of it all.
I find that really interesting, because those occasions where I'm going on and explaining a concept to people, you'll always get a message on X saying, oh, you didn't mention the latest version of Linux, or you avoided something really deeply complicated, when what you're trying to do is explain something that still bewilders a huge part of society, but they need to know more about it. My dad's a prime example, right? He says, oh, I'm 76, technology has passed me by. This is a bloke that's using YouTube, Netflix, and streaming content from his mobile phone to his TV. So he's pretty technically advanced, but unlike 15, 20 years ago, where technology was that thing in the corner of the room that you got scared about and you didn't know whether to switch it off if it went wrong, I think people have got more used to using the concept of technology, and even the people who say they don't understand it or don't use it are actually using far more tech than they thought. Exclusion is one of the big issues now in the UK, and one of the things I'm quite passionate about is that people who don't get access to devices, services are all switching to being online and digital, which on one hand I'm saying, hey, this is brilliant. But what about those people who don't have a device, haven't got decent internet, or haven't got an interest in learning how to use it? They shouldn't be left out of society either.
What's interesting when I look at the first few questions that are coming through, and thank you for them, just pop them onto the Zoom chat, we'll try and get through them as quickly as possible, is AI stands out in both of them. Enormous amounts of confusion about AI. Are you finding that it is the perennial subject you're talking about now, day by day, week by week? And how significant do you think it will be as we enter 2026?
Well, if you look at it, yes, it is something that I talk about an awful lot. But this weekend was the 3rd anniversary of ChatGPT. And the number of places that just wanted to talk about the impact, the size and the scale. And there's many ways you can take artificial intelligence. You can be terrified about it and say it's going to take all of our jobs. Or you can say there's this fantastic piece of breast cancer research that's saving lives. My partner had a really rare kind of breast cancer a couple of years ago, and thankfully through a trial is now getting better. But that really rare form of breast cancer now, you can detect it the earliest you've ever been able to detect it through the use of artificial intelligence. So surely that has to be a good thing. And then the challenge with artificial intelligence, and the thing that is a struggle to understand, it's everything from inserting John Lennon into a new Beatles song through to the systems that the Chinese and the Americans are testing about making artificial intelligence be in charge of military operations, which is something very different. So you have this whole thing, and the worry is society at some stage is going to switch off and another AI story. And that's also one of the most important things I get. The number of times I still get pitches from companies who are trying to claim something is artificial intelligence. Now, we're all short of time. Nobody needs to tell a PR or an expert that journalists are short of time. But what we don't need is an example of a bit of misleading or false information, because I can normally smell it a mile off. But there have been these occasions where people have said, this is a fantastic AI innovation, and then when you dig into it, it's like, that's not that fantastic, and it's not really artificial intelligence.
You've addressed, in essence, a couple of the questions that are emerging. I think here, are broadcasters getting tired of AI stories? And if so, how can we make them stand out? There does seem to be a ubiquity to AI stories. How do you make that story stand out?
So I'm going to take the example of AI and turn it into something that's a much bigger problem at the moment, because the appetite for AI stories hasn't yet faded in newsrooms and editors and people who are coming to me and asking me for information. But that's happening with cyber attacks. And a really good example, there are examples of, let's say a cyber attack breaks at 8:30 in the morning. I need a response at 8:45. I don't need a hot take from a company 2 days later, which is what we were getting on many of these cyber attacks. And if any of you call a cyber attack a wake-up call again, please don't, because they're not wake-up call. It shouldn't be a wake-up call to anybody in 2025. So for me, it's about having value in, if you're a company, if you're representing a company that works in cybersecurity, I don't just want their view on a story, because lots of people have got views, including myself. But if your company has got a solution, an experience, or skin in the game that can be a valuable insight, that stuff absolutely works 100%. And the other thing that is frustrating, and I dip my feet into both ponds, look on LinkedIn, you can find out about the other work that I do in the world of communications. But the number of times I get told, yeah, this will be interesting to you. And I'm like, please, let me be the judge of that.
You've mentioned cyber attacks. I'll ask you about that in a moment. The question was specifically around AI stories. Which AI story has emerged in your inbox that really did impress you?
I cannot remember the name of the charitable organisation that got in touch with me, but it was a mental health organisation with a tiny budget who got in touch to say that they were working on and developing a system which helped people at crucial points of crisis, and they were struggling to get cut through for that story. And it's a tricky one, because there are sometimes you get really great stories and you're like, I can't find a home for this. But with something like LBC News, which is the rolling news part of LBC, we were able to hook a story into there, and we were able to get it regional coverage. And that's one of the things that I think everybody always wants to go for, the LBC, or this would be great for Jeremy Vine, because I work with Radio 2. But sometimes I have to say, I'm afraid it's not going to be good for that. But I really do think there's a home for this somewhere else, because you've got stations all around the UK, and you still actually, despite all the issues about radio contracting and commercial radio having the same shows on each station, lots of these places still have regional news, so you can actually still place stories locally.
You talked about cyber attacks. It seems to be this has been the year for them. You hear about Jaguar Land Rover on its knees, you hear about M&S and Co-op so challenged. Obviously, governments are facing major issues there. Is this a growing phenomenon, or are we just seeing it more widely reported than we used to?
No, it's absolutely a growing phenomenon. And if you listen to any of the security experts, the risk and the danger is growing all the time. And now, if you talk to a cyber security expert, it's not about whether or not you're going to get attacked. It's about time to recover. And that's going to be the key thing in 2026. These attacks are going to continue. But does an organisation like a Marks and Spencer's or a Co-op need to be offline for another 4 or 5 weeks? Or should their time to recover be far quicker? And I think that's one of the things. And people are still... There's sort of all elements to these cyber attacks, for example. People are often still concerned, I've shopped with them. What does that mean to me? And that often comes to me to explain to people what they can do, how they can keep themselves protected as well as they can. But going back to the point about that's important to me, the number of people who will still message, let's say, 12 hours or more after an incident has happened and said, I've got this from this boss at this company. Now, I understand you've probably had to go through multiple legal approvals and the boss has been in meetings all day and you haven't been able to get hold of him. But you'd sooner spend your time on something better than doing that, because I'm afraid I'm not going to. I need somebody 20 minutes after something's happened with, here's our take on this, or we've got this expert available. And those are the ones that typically manage to succeed or get on air, because they're there first, because we're covering the story as it breaks, not, unless it's something really huge like the WannaCry attack on the NHS in 2017. We're not covering it for days, we're covering it at the point that it happens.
What sort of data would you like to hear, see, read when it comes to cyber attacks? It struck me that with Jaguar Land Rover, with Marks and Spencer, these are very, very big organisations with quite a lot of money in the bank. They can probably weather the storm, but I felt further down the chain there would be suppliers to Jaguar Land Rover, there would be suppliers to M&S who, with this pause in online activity, could be right up against the wall. And it strikes me that their stories are probably even more powerful than that of the main big brand.
Yeah, and that's very true. And some of the most interesting stuff that came out of the Jaguar Land Rover attack was a month or so afterwards, when I think it was estimated by the National Cyber Security Centre about the loss of value to the UK economy. And there's this sort of weird situation where cyber attacks are now, unfortunately, a part of the cost of doing business online. But we don't ever want to get to a stage where, as a society, we're not doing our bit to protect ourselves or being aware of the impact of what's around us. Because when those issues happen, like we've had these problems with Cloudflare over the last, there's been a couple of outages from some of the big cloud storage companies. Essentially, the domain name system, that the heart of the internet gets disrupted. It's like you've ripped the phone book in half, essentially. And we had a few big outages like that. And when the internet stops working, everybody automatically assumes the UK is being invaded by Russia or North Korea have done something. It can still be Terry in a server farm having a really bad afternoon.
Yeah. I know that poll that I mentioned at the start of proceedings, by the way, is just hitting your screens now. Do feel free to answer those questions. Give us a steer on events in 2026 that perhaps you'd like us to arrange for you to watch, you to contribute to. We'd very much value your input on that. You talked a little bit about health earlier on, health tech. Any sort of health brands watching this now, how does technology marry into what they might be able to offer? What might whet the appetites of producers when it comes to health and technology as a combination?
I think increasingly there is an interest in how the two things intersect. There's still a natural concern from various sources that the moment you allow tech to monitor your situation or your health, you're 1 second away from that being reported to your insurance company. That's the view in the mainstream view, and you struggle to battle that. I think there's been an awful lot of interest. One really good example would be next time somebody like Apple introduces a new feature to the Apple Watch. For example, they've done all kinds of things around ECGs. I think they've done some detection for other health issues. I don't think I've ever actually had somebody from one of those big charities around those health scenarios giving us their view on whether or not this is brilliant, what it's going to do for the NHS if it's sleep apnea, that was it. There's going to be a sleep apnea test with the Apple Watch. I'm really interested to know what that actually means. Does this mean that the NHS is suddenly going to be bombarded with people wanting sleep apnea diagnosis? Does this mean that some bloke that sells sleep apnea masks somewhere in Stoke is going to be Britain's richest man? Like, there has to be stories that attach to these decisions that the technology companies make, and that makes things like this real. That's for me one of the things that's great, is attaching human voices to these stories, because I don't always want it to be me talking about it. If we've got great stories, I'm always passionate about getting voices heard, not just mine. Real
people and the impact it's having on real people. I think that was a couple of years ago when Guide Dogs, as a charity, were putting out their Tech for All campaign. And this involved the handing of around 10,000 devices, iPads, iPhones, to children, younger people with visual impairments. What was fascinating was then hearing some of the voices from people who were using that tech or who had used tech as it evolved through the years. That can be very, very powerful.
There's a really good example. I'm wearing a pair of Meta glasses at the moment. And one of the things that when I'm talking, people ask me, oh, how do they work, etc., etc. And I promise this isn't a weird flex. I'll get to the point. I'm not showing off that I'm wearing the glasses.
I'm really looking at your glasses now. Yeah, okay.
But you can actually say, hey, Meta, what can I see? And it will tell you everything that's in the room within detail. You can stick a packet up and say, hey, Meta, what's this in front of me? And we had a bizarre... one of my colleagues had been to Japan and bought some Japanese Kit Kats back. It was like, it looks like you're looking at a Japanese Kit Kat. So this level of stuff for people who are partially sighted or have, difficulties, there's some real bits and pieces around some of this kind of technology that's already here in front of us that I don't necessarily think we've paused and said, because if I went on and said that somewhere, they'd be like, what? That's incredible.
Yes.
But it exists and it's not being tested. It's something that's on anybody who buys a pair of these glasses or bought them in the Black Friday sale for a couple of £100. You can do that already.
I think that's one of the things, certainly as a producer, I often found when putting together programmes for 5 Live, Radio 4, was if I or my colleagues were going, wow, isn't that just amazing? It was worth covering it on the airwaves, because if it wowed us, it's going to wow other people too.
Stuff moves so quickly now, that's the problem. Like, we move beyond stuff very quickly, and there is new technology being launched all the time. I've got a pair of the they've just launched them in America. There's a version 3 of these coming next year, and on one of your lenses you actually have a screen, so you can have a map or you can have whatever coming up on the screen. And for years we've been talking about virtual reality being the next big thing. I actually think a pair of glasses with a lens, or ultimately eventually a contact lens, will be the way we will use this. We're not all going to want to put a dustbin on our head in terms of virtual reality, because virtual reality headsets make me violently sick in about 15 minutes, and it's one of the things I've always struggled with. But there's the world of technology that surrounds us. We're all so used to it, but it's moving so quickly, and there's some really, really cool stuff coming.
Another question here that actually marries in with that now, product launches, the cool stuff that's coming. What's big, and what can brands or comms teams maybe plug into in 2026, this exciting thing, this product that might be coming? What's exciting you for the new year?
Well, my normal response is, I'll tell you exactly what it is once the Consumer Electronics Show has been through by about the 10th of January. But I think next year, a couple of big ones. We are going to see more kind of augmented reality through spectacles and items like this. Foldable phones, whether or not you want one, companies are still pushing on them. There are credible rumours now that Apple are in that space. Samsung just yesterday launched a trifold mobile phone, which means you can fold the screen 3 times. And I think the cheapest one of those is going to be $2,500. Now, part of my thinking goes to, isn't this cool tech? But surely you buy a really good Samsung or Apple tablet rather than spending that money on a foldable phone, which is kind of first generation technology.
I think what's fascinating is as you say, that's been in the news this week, whether it's the price point of it or the genius of the device itself. But if you are going on the airwaves to talk about a cybersecurity attack, for example, it wouldn't surprise me, depending on what your background is, that you end up being asked that final question around, by the way, one last thing before you go, what do you make of this incredible new device and how expensive it is? You have to keep your wits about you in your world, because it moves so quickly and there are so many stories evolving all the time. You have to really monitor the news websites before you ever touch the airwaves, because you might get some supplementary questions, and it's good if you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm naturally across all of this stuff anyway. As much as the common annoyance of my partner, our entrance to our house is like a Curry's warehouse, because like couriers are constantly coming back and forth because review stuff. And that's one of also the most important things. The number of times I get asked to talk about something, and then when I say, can I get one to look at? No, sorry. It's like, what do you want me to do? Describe it from your press release. And it's like, I understand that you can't provide something for everybody, but if you are asking somebody to talk about it in one of the places where I talk about it, it's about bringing it to life with experience, not just saying, hey, this looks fantastic because I've seen a video, talking about what it feels like in your hand, talking about the experience of what you've done with it, what your listeners might benefit from, or your viewers. And like at this time of year, I'm doing an awful lot of, what are your top gifts for Christmas and all of those things. And I can't have, for the 15th year in a row, me saying, get yourself a USB power pack. So all the new examples and stuff that I can see of like lower end price gadgets, technology, even through to, like, let's say there's a charity listening that's trying to do some kind of digital connectivity thing, donate money this Christmas and we'll do X, Y, or Z. That sort of thing of me saying, look, and if you don't want to buy somebody technology, but they might want to help somebody else get a tablet or a device, go and donate to this charity. That sort of thing would be valuable to me.
A question here around the sustainability of all of this, because I can see that through flow into your house. I don't know where you store it all at the end of it.
I've got a large shed with a lock on the door.
An ever larger shed.
Yeah.
How important is the sustainability angle in all of this? We're talking about the disposal of products that reach the end of life.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I have at the bottom of my garden an arcade with arcade machines from the 1980s that routinely blow up, catch fire, do all sorts of things. They were not intended to still be here in 2025. I think society and consumers are increasingly right to be concerned about how products are made, sourced, and developed, and should push the tech companies to take more steps to recycle. Apple, for example, a really good example of a company, because they've revealed the information, like they are recycling an awful lot of old parts and silicon, etc., to get back to this stage where we are now, because there's only so much rare metal available. I think there's a genuine interest in new takes on that when people have created your sustainable phones and devices. There's always been interest in covering them. I'm really interested to see what happens in 2026, given that lots of governments seem to be backing away from green issues and sustainability, whether that's going to start coming through in the tech companies or whether consumer demand still carries that level of sustainability forward.
You've highlighted the big events, Consumer Electronics Show early January, Mobile World Congress in March. You've been to those shows in the past. I think you're planning on going to the Mobile World Congress in March. How much is timing crucial for somebody who's thinking, okay, yeah, we're going to offer some expert analysis or whatever, some commentary around the time of the CES or the Mobile World Congress? How valuable is that? Or frankly, are you already drowning in material at those points, and actually people should keep away and offer you some new data or analysis at a quieter time? That's
a really good point. And I think what I would say is, I can tell when somebody has thrown a subject into an AI chatbot and has generated something which masquerades as opinion on something. If somebody has, and this is where the judgment call of whoever's involved in this project is really important. If you genuinely think you have something that is new, revolutionary, innovative, something different to say, I always want to hear that. But you'd be staggered at the number of times somebody send me, I will get sent something and I'll say, oh, that looks like that was written in ChatGPT, and I'll get a response saying, yes, sorry, the client was busy. It's like, well, next time, please don't send me it, because I was really fortunate in my career that I got given opportunities of work experience and support. So I always tried to coach people and give advice if they send me something that's not good for me. But I give a really good example at the moment. On any given day, to my general email box, which is posted on my website, I probably get 250 pictures. And one of them this morning was telling me about an amazing Christmas market somewhere up north. I am not a Christmas markets reporter. There's no technology there. Somehow somebody's added me to a mailing list. And that's one of the biggest problems with dealing with PR these days. The reason why some stories get lost is because they are drowning in the noise.
For CES in January, question here. What will producers be looking out for in spokespeople who would like to comment on this particularly?
I think what we would be looking for, or what would interest producers, will be companies who are operating in that space, have their own views, their own opinions, maybe in an adjacent sector or space, or have an understanding of a market and being able to explain why something is important. I think the relevance of products coming out of CES is also intriguing. And for every colour-changing BMW you have at CES, which was one of the huge ones about 5 years or so ago, and that got tons of coverage, you've got 60 new freezers from LG. No disrespect to LG, because fantastic kit. But you're not going to get coverage for a freezer, but you might for some of the new concepts. And I think AI concepts, in the same way as a couple of years ago, everything at CES was about Alexa and having Alexa installed. I think chatbots will be probably in everything, including fridges and freezers, at CES next year.
Is it good, follow-up question to actually what was just asked there, is it good if someone is actually at the event, at CES, so that you are able to say, is there, let's speak to them now type stuff?
That works so much better for most organisations, because you can give a feel for what's happening there. You can give a bit of, with modern smartphones, etc., you can still manage to get a bit of atmos from an event and just a bit of a feel for what's going on there. Because those people who've been, let's say, to CES, it's so hard to describe that, you should be breaking in a pair of shoes for CES 6 months or more before.
Yeah.
And people who go to CES will know exactly what I mean.
It's a long walk.
It's a long walk around there. And the other thing with CES that's the biggest challenge, I love going, but I can get most of the stuff these days is provided to me in press packs or briefings or pre-briefings, or I can get online for the really important things that I need to be there for.
You talked about this incredible shed at the bottom of your garden, storing loads of gizmos, but also storing arcade games from 40 odd years ago.
Yeah.
How much does retro, looking back, nostalgia play a part in the broadcast that you're asked to do? Because I'm picturing the popularity of a ZX Spectrum game that I enjoyed 40 years ago that suddenly rears its head again.
I reckon it's one of the reasons I get the bookings that I get, because my background, if you see me on TV or on video, are I think I've got 7 or 8 different arcade machines behind me in my studio with a professional camera and lighting and all of the stuff that you need in order to make it look good. And it's a different background. And you'll often see me sometimes, if I get a random call, pop up in like a room which looks like I'm in a white prison cell. And that's never as appealing a place to work or perform. But retro tech is of increasing interest, and I do a lot of work with a brilliant broadcaster called Clive Bull on LBC, and Clive has been at LBC for 40 odd years, and is just as passionate about talk radio as he ever was. He does Friday nights from 1 a.m. till 4, Saturday nights and Sunday nights. But randomly, we had a conversation about a week or two ago about laser discs. It was just we do 15 minutes talking about tech every week, but they started getting calls from listeners who, and not many people had a Laserdisc player.
Well, they were expensive.
Yeah, they were, and they were really niche tech even in the 90s. But something about old stuff that you have. It's much like when the Argos catalogue ended. Everybody was like, they were still doing the Argos catalogue, but then it got a load of coverage.
Yeah, at the end of the line for the Ford Fiesta,
Yeah,
I remember.
the VHS recorder.
Yeah, exactly. and the rise again of record players, that sort of tech. I mean, we were always conscious at Radio 4 that while there was this rise being reported in the press, it was actually a very niche thing still. It wasn't, the definitive source of where people were listening to their latest single.
I believe the Canadian Record Association said in 2022 that 50% of the records purchased in Canada were not played.
Interesting.
They're on the wall.
I do think nostalgia pricks the attention of many producers, because they know that the audience will just love talking about something that they owned 20, 30, 40 years ago. Days gone by works, even though we're talking about the very latest tech. Yesterday's tech can really appeal. Crystal ball time, if there was to be the moment of 2026, what's it going to be specifically about, and when's it going to be?
It's going to be an AI crash. And I don't think that means the world of AI is going to completely disintegrate and we'll all decide that we're not going into AI and we're going to go back into caves. But I think there is an awful lot of over-optimism in the space at the moment. And I think if China could finally prove that it's managed to have some successes making large language models with lower power computing hardware and lower specs, lower power demands, I think that might impact some of the Western, we need the most powerful rigs, we're building nuclear power stations to power the server farms that we need. There was another really interesting thing that came through that all stacks up, but I haven't seen a great deal of news coverage for. There was some HSBC analysis which suggested that by 2033, OpenAI have committed to $1.4 trillion of server space compute per year. And that leaves them with a black hole of over $200 billion in potential profit. I can't go to the bank and say my mortgage will be all right in 15 years. So there's going to be some adjustment in this market, and I think that's going to be one of the big things. I also think there'll be some companies will leap into AI next year, and we'll hear about some big job losses. I think there's going to be some big changes.
AI at the heart of the news stories, perhaps, of next year. One story that caught my eye was Virgin Media O2's efforts at targeting the scammers with their Daisy, this little old lady, this granny bot who a scammer would maybe be speaking to Daisy all of a sudden, and she would keep a scammer on the line for upwards of an hour and stop the scammer getting hold of my mum or your mum or whatever. Very clever stuff.
Yeah, I fell in love with that story, and I did a lot of coverage with it, and there was something in the back of my mind going, is this 100% true? But technically it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
And I love the idea. And you know what the best bit about that was? They created a really good explainer video that had great audio, and we were able to play that as part of the explainer for the piece. They picked the right old granny voice for the character.
We certainly enjoyed working on it, helping support on that particular thing, and it's fascinating that you were falling in love with it independently of us.
Yeah, I didn't even know you then, for clarification.
Yeah, but it's lovely to know it was scoring. Why was that scoring? Was it because of the novelty? But you talk about the great sort of assets that they were offering you to help explain it. But essentially, it was a solution to a problem.
Yeah, the story was really well positioned and pitched. Everybody's got a gran that talks for ages on the phone and says random stuff to them, or did have. Everybody knows scammers are annoying and are a growing problem. This was a really innovative solution that proved to be funny, engaging, and for LBC, for example, I think Clive, on the back of that, Clive did talk to us about scam experiences. Are they getting more? You're getting more of them? Are they getting more kind of convincing? All of that kind of stuff. So it's a jump off point, and the assets were the icing on the cake for that particular story.
There's two things I want to talk to you about. One is a question coming in here,
Sure.
And the other thing is podcasts. You are a regular contributor to several podcasts. There is a weekly one. Talk us through that one.
Yeah, so I am really fortunate to work with guys called Jamie East and Liam Thompson, who run a podcast called The Smart 7. They've been running that for 4 or 5 years. And about 18 months ago, I randomly got a message from Jamie and said, any chance you could do a regular weekly 5 or 6 minutes about the week in tech for the podcast, the Sunday 7, which is the kind of, here's a look back over the main stories of the week. And it's self-contained 6 or 7 minutes of the biggest or most interesting stories of the week. And one of the ones we're having a discussion about in the WhatsApp group at the moment is there's this tremendous story about a new ultra high definition version of Mad Men, the classic TV show, has been put up to platforms this week. They've forgotten to add the visual effects, and nobody has a clue of how this could possibly happen. But there's all sorts of people hiding in plain sight in scenes because somebody has suggested that will be edited out. But it's stories like that. It's stories about Elon Musk. It's stories about robots. It's a really sort of quirky run through what we do, and I get such great freedom and encouragement from the guys to have some fun with it. So I sort of say it's the best few minutes of my week normally, because I just really enjoy writing it and then enjoy delivering it. And recently they've just tied up with Metro, so it was doing really well before, but it's really heavily promoted via the Metro paper now, so it's brilliant. And
how interesting is something so revolutionary, arguably,
is
actually covered by an old-fashioned print paper. Essentially, it's amazing how promotion in one world seems to help build another world, and I think that with broadcast and podcasting.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been experimenting with the idea of doing something similar myself. sort of daily tech news podcast, which I was going to use. I've cloned my voice successfully through an AI tool, and I've done a couple of tests with that. It's one of those things whereby how do you build and grow an audience? How do you spend the time on these things? Time on that would take my time away from the other work that I'm doing in the space. So it's one thing I'm considering for 2026. If things slow down a bit in one way, I might launch something. And I'm really fortunate in that whenever I appear anywhere, people always say, "Have you got anything to plug or promote?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. I'm not, but maybe I might have something in the future."
The thing that dazzled me, by the way, with the Smart 7 podcast is it's presented by an AI presenter some of the time, is it not?
Yeah, so Jamie is a really busy guy. He's actually head of podcasting now at the Mail Group, or whatever the company's called that runs. I don't know what the company's called, but you'll know what I mean. The people who own the Daily Mail. He's an incredibly intelligent guy, and he has not got time to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to create a daily brief of news for 7 a.m. So they've been using AI longer than anybody I know. And I know Jamie's voice and I know the production, so sometimes I sit there and go, "Ooh, that's an interesting pronunciation of that football player." But nine times out of 10, most people wouldn't think that there was an AI-powered Jamie running that.
Yeah, we'll see how quickly I'm eclipsed and I'm an AI version. A couple of final questions coming through here.
Sure.
Your home setup, what's it like when you're doing interviews at home? What piece of tech would you recommend spokespeople to have? Is there some fantastic gizmo or device that really makes your life easier at home?
Right. So my home setup is I use an iMac computer. I've got an external camera plugged into it, so I'm not using the webcam. I've got a couple of different cameras which you then connect with a capture card. I then have a microphone plugged into a little desk like you would see in a radio studio, and the Rodecaster Pro is a really good one. I'm on no commission at all, but I buy all of their products, and they actually have one now which is both video and sound. It just means that you've got in front of you, if I'm ever in the middle of an interview and I need to cough, I can press the mute button without panicking and trying to click something on the screen if I'm on Zoom. And something like that is actually really useful if you do a lot of this. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was doing one of the sort of BBC central news rounds around dodgy fire sticks, and it was a campaign around kind of reminding people that it might be great that your mate's selling this down the market, but there's serious consequences coming if you're using them. And sort of 15 to 20 interviews in there, you'll be amazed at the number of times your voice will suddenly do something and you just need to clear your throat. And rather than do that live on air, you can just quickly mute yourself and nobody will know you're doing it.
If you didn't jot down all of those tips, don't forget this event will be on the Broadcast Revolution website. You can listen again and jot all of those elements down.
And I'm also happy to send, if I'm at Will Guyatt on X, send me a message if you're interested in knowing what it is. I think the thing that really works for a lot of people now is don't stick a laptop on your desk in front of you and let people see your nasal hair.
Yes.
Think creatively. And it doesn't mean you have to have the world's most exciting room, but just positioning the laptop or somewhere in something which gives it a bit of character and a bit of flavour is preferable. And arguably the reason I've got so much busier is because I was going to say standards have slipped, but I'm going to rephrase that in a way that so I live just outside of Swindon. I have built a studio in my garden and made it as decent as I can in terms of sound, lighting and visuals. I don't need to come into London all the time now to go into studios to do stuff. And nearly all broadcasters, unless it's someone like This Morning or Breakfast TV, will accept that. And that's fine for me.
Yeah, absolutely. One final question.
Sure.
Thank you so many questions came through. We've tried to cover as many of them as we can. What tech story do you think is underserved right now? And if someone watching this should build around that, what tech story do you need to know more about?
Oh, Lord.
Good question, isn't it?
That is a really, really interesting question. And I'm just literally going through everything that's sat in my mind and thinking, why on earth can't I get somebody interested?
I guess another way probably to ask it would be, when have you been asked by the Jeremy Vine programme or whatever to maybe come on and talk about something and you've gone, crikey, I wish I knew a bit more about that?
I think sometimes that can happen quite often, because my role is for somebody to have a general understanding, and then I need to read into stuff. So, the presenter has that much knowledge, I have that much knowledge, you as the expert might have that much knowledge.
Don't forget that.
And that's the most important thing, because you're the experts. I'm just the bloke kind of with enough working knowledge to talk about it. You know what? This is the first time I'm going to be lost for words, because I cannot constructively think of something at the moment which I'm thinking I could do with. But the examples that I've given you, for example, around cyber attacks and AI, about the ideas of the types of stuff that are useful.
Their impact, I think. It's useful for you to be able to say, yes, Jeremy Vine, cyber attacks are a big thing. They are becoming more significant. And here's some really interesting analysis that proves that point. I think furnishing you with data.
Yeah, numbers and data are really interesting. And I still find myself often referring to stuff that was sent to me 18 months ago, if it still makes the message. So it's one of these tricky things, right, whereby I kind of want to say, send me everything, I'll have a look. But at the same time, I won't be able to cope with everything.
No.
And that's one of the challenges in this particular work, in that lots of people want to get stories on air and all believe that they have the best stories. The best relationships for me with contributors, people who bring me stuff, are the ones who know what to bring me and what not to bring me.
Yeah.
The ones who have at least looked at the type of stuff that I cover, the sort of things that I'm talking about, stuff that's in context in the news, stuff that they've got which is valuable and is not either a stretch to refer to it as AI or they are just regurgitating something. Bring me something new and authentic, and I will definitely try and do something with it. I can't do something with everything though. I am only one person, and I am beholden to news editors, news agenda, breaking news, everything else. But what I try and do is do my best to represent tech in a really human, understanding way, and I can also get into some of the weeds on the complex stuff. But often I'll say there'll be a better person about that, and that's what I need, more better people.
Interesting. Will, thank you so much for your
Pleasure.
hints, your tips, your advice, your experiences. Thank you so much to Will Guyatt for taking the time to be with us today. We are putting together a whole calendar of these events for the new year. Thank you for taking part in the poll that we put up a little earlier. To start the year, we're actually going to bring you the conclusions of our broadcast report of 2026. It's being written for us by the former editor of BBC Radio 5 Live's Drive Time programme, Anna Stewart. She's been sounding out power players from both the broadcast and the public relations world. So I'm very much looking forward to chatting with Anna about that as we get 2026 underway. See you then, I hope. And in the meantime, do have a very Merry Christmas.